Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session in the 7 Stages of Life presented by Beezone. And in the studio tonight is Frank Marrero and Ed Reether, founder of Beezone. And so tonight's session is on the 4th stage of life. We've covered the first 3 stages, which are the elements of basically money, food, and sex. And if you've been following with us, you'll know that the first introduction to the series brought an overview of the 7 stages. And so now we enter into what's called the spiritualization of the human evolution of life. So the 4th stage of life basically is what now becomes the spiritual life, in the true sense of the word.
And before we get started, especially here, we need another really big Yvonne. This we have heard.
And who we have heard it from.
And who we've heard it from, exactly. Since the spiritualization stage is really the precinct of saints, we have, and only Adi Da, who has utterly completed the spiritual process, has laid this out for us so succinctly, and is leading us to becoming human, which is the hardest. This is the greatest, most difficult stage, as he says, and so we bow in eternal gratitude to the great one Adi Da for teaching us this. Not so that we'll just be simply inspired, but the errors and the context of it actually helps us grow up more efficiently. It brings an elegance to our life that we're handling in 3rd stage ways as well.
And one of the blessings is that Adi Da has brought to us, and also to you, and also to the world, is because there is a transition in not only the spiritual adept, the practitioner. There is a crisis that is inherent not only in the transition that we're going to talk about tonight, but also the transition in the world. And because Adi Da has brought now a 7-stage teaching that has never been before brought into this kind of context of the world now. And it is because the traditions that were once provincial are now global.
Yeah, the walls are down, and so we no longer can justify, and rightly shouldn't, any one province and any one provincial orientation. And in our new age, the true new age is a global. Right. We have to understand all the provincial schema and visions within a great single tradition, which he has outlined perfectly.
And so what he's basically claiming in his teaching and stating in his teaching is that there is only one single tradition of the great tradition. It is completely unified in the 7-stage teachings of Adi Da. And so each stage has its era, and we'll speak about that. But right now we're only into the 4th stage of individual human development, but also on a global level, because this is where it starts to get into a spiritualization. I guess we could maybe start with some of the taboos. Why are there so many taboos, or
This is not popular. You don't see this on TV. Well, just like the school system in America is built around a factory model, their underlying or unsaid or sometimes said purpose is to make good workers, and so that they can go out and be productive citizens. If they're if someone has a message that's counter to that, well, right away. You're fighting money? You're fighting the money interest? It doesn't work.
So I guess another way to say it is that Adi Da says there is a taboo against ecstasy.
Yes, because it's, it's not, you have to be controlled.
Well, see, there is the difference, right? Because when we're not talking about anti-religious, we're kind of bringing religion into a spiritual context. And so I guess the religious teachings today are more moralistic.
Right, it's about the first three stages. So religion is fine and acceptable as long as it serves the purposes of the first three stages of life. Orderly society, productive society, and which it rightly should do. There is a purpose of growing people up to become human, but not too much, because you have to continue to serve this world, so to speak, and all the purposes of the system, which it relies on money to continue for its continuance. When you start having something else said that's about ecstasy, that's not necessarily controlled, that is about freedom from maturation of all of that, that's really not supported. Right. And in fact, there's a long history of somebody speaking the truth. Well, let's feed them hemlock, let's crucify them, let's cut their head off. There's a long list of our very best. Because here's why. You have only a few options if someone is speaking the truth. The most unlikely and least acceptable is that you change your way of life and grow up. That you renounce the stupid things that's been revealed to you and take on a way of living that supports the heart and higher human development. Well, that's not going to happen. So your other options are to ignore the voice, which is common, demonizing it, or just cut the voice, killing it. So those are our options when someone speaks of real human maturity, that speaks the truth. We can change or get rid of the voice.
Or we could corrupt the voice.
Yeah, right. Which is another way of getting rid of it.
Right, right. We can take a little bit here, take a little bit there, start mixing it up and making it our own.
Right.
And that's where the corruption of the truth will you can make it into your own teaching. You can take it into blend it
piecemeal.
Right.
Piecemeal it. And get rid of the teacher for sure.
Oh, you don't want the cook with the soup. You just want the soup.
So all of those are orientations of the third stage, right, where you take the pieces and you're going to make it up because it's a really still ego oriented, and as long as they're taking some good things, that's okay for growing up, but it's not real religion. So there is a taboo against actual human maturity. I've been successful myself, and no. So we have to realize this, and understand this taboo, both in ourselves and in society, so that we understand we're not going to take heaven by storm. We're not going to take a third stage. Oh, let's just see what Adi Da has to say, and I'll take a little bit of that. And I really like what Mayor Baba said about this. I'm going to take a little bit of that, and I'm going to stir it into my own little soup that fits me. That's not it. That is a third stage orientation. Now, the great process of the third stage is harmonization of the lower life. All the things, money, food, and sex is a general way of addressing that. Now the harmonization, as it matures, becomes what is characterized in the fourth stage of life as spiritualization.
Right. So those lower stages now are submitted, because what's awakened in the fourth stage is really the subtle dimension. There are basically three, as in the traditions and in Adi Da's teaching, there are three levels of experience.
Three egos.
Right. There's the gross level, right? The material level, which includes mind, includes emotion, but it manifests in the material, into the gross dimension. Then there's the subtle, or what we call the dream state, or in the lower dream. There's different levels of it, and different sheaths, as they did in the traditions. And so what's awakened in the fourth stage of life is truly the bridge from the gross to the subtle. And that's what's awakened in the individual.
Right, that characterizing harmonization to spiritualization. Harmonization, you can still, oh yeah, you have to have right diet, and you have to have right livelihood, and you're harmonizing your relations. That's all, it's in some sense it's gross, and in another sense it's the refining and harmonizing. And now, that overlaid that, as it were, there's a subtle side of harmony that is spiritual.
Right, and so the left side, and it is manifest in the body, because this is not just Dharma of mind Dharma. This is a bodily based yoga, which is no understanding without yoga. There is a manifestation of a subtle energy. So the body, the sides of the body are now unified into a central channel, if you will, a subtle channel, which moves this left side, the emotional side, the human side, the left side of the heart, into the center. And so now the harmonization not only occurs in mind, but it occurs in body. So this is a bodily based yoga.
There's reflections in the body.
Right. So what's awakened is the heart.
True heart, what's called the true heart.
The true heart.
As opposed to sentimental, romantic, energetic, enthusiastic. Those are all left-hearted. Now and as Adi Da points out, the sign, the signature of the left heart is a sense of promise. Oh, I'm going to read this, I'm going to meet this person, and then it's going to be better. I'm going to understand this talk, and then I'm going to be better. I'm going to meet this person, and we're going to live happily ever after, is the corny way of going about it. But all of those things have a subtle sense of promise. So any heartedness that one has, and it has that, oh yeah, it's going to get better, that's still left-hearted first three stages. Now we're moving into where the discrimination that arises in the maturation of the third stage sees that false sense of promise, and goes, oh, it's not about me, it's surrender, sacrifice, giving, or what the early Christians called the difference between eros love and agape love. So now you're not going to be fulfilled by your new lover. You are glad to have someone to love. Not that it's going to all work out great. Right. So that transition to the middle heart is this fourth stage onset.
And with that awakening comes the psychic dimension, where now the world is becoming a psychic kind of manifestation. It is not just a physical manifestation, it is a psychic manifestation.
And now that's also a function of the body-mind to understand this. So just because one can see, and you do in the second stage, this psychic, magical interconnectedness with the world and your feelings and emotion, that doesn't mean that, no, I must be in the fourth stage of life, I can have a psychic feeling of things. No. But what you're talking about is a rested sense of feeling that also rests in the psychic interconnectedness. Psyche as in depth of feeling in the middle heart, not psychic as in...
Well, there is that aspect to it, because the mystical aspect of your ascension, if you will, and your meditation, in your yoga, will show itself. These have to be purified as much as the world in the gross dimension has to be purified. And you may very well experience ascended kinds of energies, visions, and
of course,
and sounds and lights,
raptures, raves.
This is what's awakened, and so this is where people who use drugs will find, oh, there's this higher sense of my mind or this life, and so I go up. I want to go into that, but you haven't purified this lower level, and so you'll fall into the era of what's called the four-stage era, that you'll always think it's ascension, it's up, it's other, it's in, and you get some sense of it. Everybody has a sense of what we're talking about, if you have anything going on.
I think it's useful. Ken Wilber, a great American philosopher, has a great little distinction that he talks about the difference between a state and a stage. And a state is when we experience, come into the inside of the actual feeling of what it would be like at these different levels of human maturation temporarily. You may have a drug experience, as you said, or you may just be rested temporarily in love. and you understand all this lower life stuff with exquisite detail, and you are rightly related to everything. How long does it last? We're talking stage, where not a state. So we all have these state experiences of higher stages, but we have to be humble enough to, honest enough with ourselves to say, now I understand it. I've still got work to do. This is not stable. When it's stable, even background stable, it's stage, not state. So we can have experiences of the fourth stage. Everyone who truly loves does, because it is the spiritualization, true love stage. And many of us have, outside of teens, know the difference between romance, erotic romance feelings, and real love. Mm-hmm. And even some teens know this real love. So having a temporary experience of it, which we all do, is not the same as the stage development. We're talking about the fourth stage of life, right, which we can all experience, come to a realization of temporarily, of the stage.
Right. And the stage has, as Frank was referencing, a progression to it. There are middle stages, there are end stages, there are development stages.
Onset, focus, and maturation. Right?
There's movement. There's an energy movement in the fourth stage. Mm-hmm. And so the primary thing that you must remember is that you become responsible for a mechanism that is in your body-mind that is known as contraction, or the crisis,
which is the avoidance of relationship.
Right. And
the contraction of feeling is the avoidance of relationship. They are singularity, and this becomes clear.
Right. And you become convicted, and that's the crisis. Because there has to be a crisis for this awakening to occur. Mm-hmm. And the crisis isn't this. This is a limitation. There has been a recoil to a primary open energy that you have through fear. So basically the fourth stage of life is a movement out of the survival fear-based mechanism of the body-mind to an open state of you are more than just what you look like. Mm-hmm. In the fuller sense of the word, that you have really truly transcended not only your own limited body-mind in the beginning sense, mm-hmm, is that you've also transcended the limitation of the world that you live in, the culture, because it's all based on this kind of survival mechanism. Let's build defenses and
take care of number one first.
And now the world is in this kind of moment.
Teenage wasteland. It's only teenage wasteland. Right. And as you were saying, there's a crystalline understanding of this mechanism, so that you can actually take real responsibility for it. This is not just an energetic. Right. This energetic is a way to adapt to it. In other words, open yourself open. Have therapies, have opening experiences. That's good. But now we're doing it on a deeper level, where in consciousness there is a crystalline understanding that not only am I contracted, I'm contracting. Right. And you see it. And because there is a depth of real rest in the natural relatedness of existence. And so because of that, you can see how you don't do that more accurately, mm-hmm, because you have seen it and have taken the harmonization responsibility. Now you can see, I'm always doing this. I'm not just contracted, I am always contracting every experience. Even if somebody says, I love you, even if somebody says, you want a chocolate ice cream, that you do this first. You start to see it in action. So
it's already been in place, and now you're getting awakened to that. So to really understand the fourth stage of life, you have to understand the teachings of Adi Da, and you have to understand what he refers to as hearing. Mm. And that you can look further into the literature of that and get a sense of what this relates to in terms of his concept of hearing. And then also seeing.
Which is the in consciousness.
Consciousness.
In consciousness, not in mind.
Right.
You see it in mind in the third stage. Now you see it in consciousness, in rested feeling. There's a in time, in real time understanding of that mechanism, so that the fourth stage of life then proceeds by adapting to full relatedness.
Mm-hmm. And that's the key, because once this relatedness is felt and awakened, is that there is a sense of equanimity in the current, because now there's not only the awakening occurring here, is the higher mind is being awakened, because associated with this body mind is the related. Now you see the unity, you feel the unity, you are the unity of the world and being. So now it's a plastic kind of dimension that you live in
And rest in.
Because now you are awakened to another sense of energy, a current that is now no longer just held on to, it's released, and it has its own kind of movement. It is a circle, as he says, in the body-mind. So there's the descension and the ascension. Now, the fourth stage is primarily dealing with the descending force. Mm-hmm. The later stages we talk about the ascension, but it awakens that movement, the descension. So there's a unity field. There's a sense of relatedness, and that's a key term in the fourth stage of life, is relatedness, and the internal mechanisms of the body-mind start to. So now you submit. Now you realize what is happening is that you're no longer confined, if you will, to just the sensual pleasures and the closed nature of life. You're now expanded into a larger sense of energy field, and now the law. Now you're submitted to the law. You've been awakened to the law. And so the law is now submission to a sense of prior unity, of where you now, in a sense, must get out of the way. Because now there's a higher sense going on.
Which is, you're distracted by, you understand
right.
that not only are you contracted, you're contracted in a great field of energy, of the great energy, not energies. For instance, in the third stage of life, when we do this conductivity exercises of reception down the frontal line, it's, while there is some understanding of the rightness of it, you are still, it's still like, people can still do it. Oh yeah, I'll breathe this, I'll relax this first. Okay, now I feel relaxing here, now I feel relaxing. This is a third stage way of approaching it. And that's how we start.
Right.
But that's not it. Right. That is it, but that's not it.
It was a preparatory.
But now you are grateful, not you are experimenting with the grateful feeling. You are grateful. You rest in God. You realizing, feeling the spiritual reality, feeling this, then the rest becomes real instead of conceived.
Right. And you said the word distracted, which is truly what you're now, not only distracted, but you're attracted. Mm-hmm. You have a true devotional movement in you, in submitting to what is greater than what you previously viewed as oneself. You now have awakened, so why would you not move?
Well, now that's your practice.
Exactly.
And so, and in fact, the great traditional text that is so great in this, which Adi Da recapitulated for us and taught us, is the Bhagavad Gita. Where it says, listen to me and hear me. This is my secret. I will tell you what will benefit you the most because I love you. If you will surrender to me, if you'll become a sacrifice to me, if you'll constantly yield your attention to me through love and service, then you'll attain me and come to me. I promise you this because I love you. Abandon the principle in all your concerns and all your strategies. Abandon every experience that may be attained as a result of desire and effort. Abandon your search for what may be gotten as a result of the various kinds of strategic action. Engage every action that is appropriate for one who loves me, and simply perform every action as a form of present and direct communion with me. Relax all of your anxiety. Be free of sorrow and fear. When you abide in love communion with me, the natural results of your various activities no longer have the power to separate or distract you from me. So this, to me, his recapitulation of the Bhagavad Gita, this is a perfect description of the third to fourth stage transition. Right. Abandon your search, abandon the strategies, simply abide in love communion with me, the me of God and the me of the Guru.
And that release now is your obligation, because you now can take responsibility for that.
Because you are truly awakened to a depth understanding, real reality.
And so then in the repolarization, if you will, of your psychic and bodily dimension now becomes the disciplines of your life is submitted to this process. You can continue on with whatever you need to do, because this does not negate ordinary life.
Yeah, simply perform every action as a form of present and direct communion with me. And then therefore your engagement of life no longer has the power to separate or distract you from me.
And so life in its fullness continues. And
true fullness now.
Right, and we're not talking about now you become a saint, right? That's a function.
Or successful.
Right, whatever. It's just that you submitted to a higher principle, and whether that principle is manifested as you as a, whatever your form of stage of life is, and what it manifests as is just what it is. And so what you now do is the key in this fourth stage of life is everything that is manifested is presented to you in the psychic kind of realm. This is now received as what is at this particular moment appropriately what is supposed to be given. And now the purification, the true spiritual process, purification starts. So whether that be difficult or is, and tapas is part of this whole stage, is that you are now rested, but now the purification process really starts.
Absolutely. So everything that comes up is a blessing or a test.
And everything that is brought to you is a blessing or a test. And received in that, it's not that you just take it as a kind of, a thorn crown of thorns. It's just, you're not just that. You are now working with this. You're working that, and now you begin to see that you can really start to work in this. You can, magic starts happening.
Yeah, you see the magical interconnection of everything. And as Master also had us study the teachings and practices of Ram Dass, not hippie Ram Dass, Baba Ram Dass, as I make the distinction. And his, this is where the traditional practice of prapatti truly is useful. And the prapatti is whatever arises, you understand that this is God, and what is being given to you is divine, and caringly given to you to help you outshine this human inconsistency, this human terrible condition.
And that's where true prayer can come into your life. And now
Absolutely.
You can submit that manifestation, whatever, to your connection to the divine, and it actually changes. True prayer is communion. And now it gets to be a kind of a manifest of union of magical energies. And this is why it gets like, whoa.
There's not just energies,
Yeah,
as he says, such devotees find me alive as the presence of love that plays the world. And so Baba Ram Dass used to, whatever arose, he would say Ram, the name of God. Oh, this is happening. Oh, this is a gift. Providence is a third stage understanding of this. the universe is aptly named. It's a single verse. It's a singularity, and you rest in that singularity so that everything that arises there is communion with it. As Master says in the Knee of Listening, if you're disturbed by what arises, you are not in proper relation to it. So if you're disturbed by what arises, you're not in proper relation. And relatedness is this signature of this fourth stage. You have adapted to relatedness, you exercise relatedness in form of communion, in the form of ordinary relatedness, in everything that comes up for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that you will find in this fourth stage is in your practice is samadhi, which is various different levels of samadhi, and we don't want to go into the technical aspects of them. But there is the ability to be an absorbed meditative state.
Swooned.
Swoon. You are in the energies of this awakened part of this fourth stage of life. There is the ability to actually be in a meditative, which is a more of a noun as opposed to a verb. It's a state. And so it is also a transitional place, but you are now rested in this current, and so there is the ascent, the movement of energy is now into the middle brain, and eventually move to the third eye or the ajna door,
as the fifth stage onsets.
As the fifth stage is, but the energies you can rest the energies up. You're up above in the energy field, present
because you rest in love.
Right.
There's natural rapture in love. This is a natural process, grounded in consciousness understanding and bodily submission.
Right. And there are no buttons there to say that you are, or badges or marks of distinction that kind of show this. But one of the signs, if you look in a culture, and this really has a kind of a cultural kind of dimension to it, because in our culture it's not fully recognized or even acknowledged that this is even possible. But the brightening of your body-mind and your brightening of your life will show itself. And that was one of the signs that this is not just the talking school. It is actually a brightening, because the purification process is occurring. You are in the kiln, as he says, in the brightening process. And so that's one of the signs of what a person in the fourth stage, that's where you get to the saints and
the stability of love.
The stability of love.
I also want to point out what is called the liability of this fourth stage of life, which is an attachment to dualism. Because here you're in love, but you're attached to your beloved, and the traditional story that illustrates this so perfectly is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, his power of the heart, metaphored through his lyre, could charm wild beasts. They said even trees and stones would lean to listen to his music. Even the sirens would fall silent when he played his music. Even the dog that guarded the underworld allowed him to go through death in love. That power is stronger than the material, the psychic, the siren calls. In even death, love can somehow go through death. But he was doing that because he was missing his beloved. And so he went to Hades to get her. It didn't quite work out. We don't need to go into the whole long story. But he could not come out with her. And that was the breaking of that dualism. So God being other, you're resting in God, but you're still praying to a God that's other. Because you have adapted to the sense of relatedness. And in the sense of relatedness, there's still me and my beloved. So that is the liability. Martin Buber's book I and Thou comes to mind. this is great stage, but it still is not the fullness of Adi Da's full revelation. So this liability of cultic attachment, of as he says, and Master says in the Hymn of the Master, those who see this spiritual master as God in person must go on to transcend themselves and the person of the master in God alone. There is no substitute for God. There's no substitute for your own direct realization of God. So this liability of this fourth stage of life, while the fourth stage of life is a true human maturation and the most difficult of all stages, it still also contains this growth. There's still growth beyond this.
Right, and it is a necessary transition that must occur. So you can't just quickly bypass, get this information in the fourth stage and jump into the... You must transition through this. And so these are the errors that occur along the way. But they're subtle errors and they're not common errors, and they're not,
But it's good for us to study them even in our
absolutely.
Even in our earlier stages, because we won't become cultically fascinated with any one way, any one thing, any one person.
And that's the necessity of studying the teaching.
That's
because
right.
as you do progress, you need to have an understanding. You need to know what the errors will be, and you will be convicted by them, but you will have to go through them.
Right, and the more you know about them in advance, the more elegant and graceful the process is.
And that's discriminative intelligence, which is developed truly in the third stage of life.
Begins there, yes.
Without the equipment of the first, second, and third, you're not going to really transition through.
You won't be stable in the full relatedness of love communion. Right. That full relatedness has its own liability of relatedness itself, but we'll give you a pass on that one. If you can be stable in love, that will be a natural understanding that will grow.
Right.
But worth noting for now, in theoretical terms for us.
As
Anyway,
Ram Surat Kumar used to say, I'm just a sinner, I'm just a sinner, I'm just a sinner. And here's a fifth stage yogi, and all he kept on saying, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner.
You know, Master pointed out that that's what, when you're really truly awakened into this fourth stage way, that's what you're into the higher spiritualization phases. All you see is your since you see this so distinctly now, what you're going to see is only your turning away.
Right.
What's going to come up for you is that's going to be in your face more acutely than ever before.
Moment to moment to moment to moment, and the intensity is only intensifying. So now, as you refine, all you're seeing now is this moment intensifying, 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 intensifying. So the atomic moment is this moment, the spontaneous moment.
I believe it's on 71.
And so we'll end at this point, and next week we'll get into the fifth stage, which is the truly mystical and ascended stage.
And I'll end with a reading. When you see that you're always seeking, understanding is emerging. When you see the pattern of Narcissus as all of your motives, all of your acts, all of your seeking, understanding is emerging. When you see that you're always suffering, understanding is emerging. When you see that every moment is a process of dilemma, understanding is emerging. When you see that every moment is a process of identification, differentiation, and desire, understanding is emerging. When you see that every moment, when you're at your best, as well as when you're at your worst, you're only avoiding relationship, then you understand. When you see that which already is apart from the avoidance of relationship, already absorbs your consciousness prior to the whole dilemma, motivation, and activity of avoidance, then you have finally understood. May we surrender to the Great One.
And we'll see you next week.